The sun beat down on the cracked pavement of Paris Island as the bus doors hissed open. Recruits stumbled out, blinking into the blinding light like newborns. Barking orders erupted instantly. Drill instructors paced like wolves' shaven heads, reflective sunglasses, voices like gunfire. There was no time to breathe, no time to think. Among them stood Alyssa Ramirez, her boots just barely touching the yellow footprints, an infamous tradition marking the start of Marine boot camp. She was 24, barely 5'4", and slender. Enough that her rucksack looked twice her size. Her brown hair was tightly braided, her jaw clenched, her heart pounding like a war drum. From the moment she stepped off that bus, eyes were on her. Not admiring, not curious judging. She looks like she should be in college, not here, someone muttered from behind. Another recruit snorted. Hope she packed her nail polish. Alyssa said nothing. She'd expected this. Her presence was a contradiction. A former librarian turned Marine hopeful. She hadn't grown up with brothers, hadn't played contact sports, hadn't even been to the shooting range before enlisting. But none of that mattered now. She wasn't here to impress them. She was here to transform. But Paris Island wasn't interested in personal journeys. It was a crucible. The first 2 days were a blur of noise and commands. Shouts during chow line. Silence during sleep. Every word spoken to her came as an order, an accusation, or a judgment. Her gear felt heavier with each hour. Her body, sore by the first sunrise, felt foreign, weak. The other recruits began sizing one another up early. The tall, muscular ones bonded quickly, laughing in short bursts, slapping each other's backs, asserting dominance. Alyssa barely spoke, only nodded when addressed. One guy, Mahoney, a former high school wrestler from Texas, made a game of mocking her under his breath. She, still learning how to lace those boots? Probably gonna write a poem about her blisters. The others chuckled, not cruelly, but as if it were normal. She wasn't one of them. Not yet. Not ever. They assumed Dot by the end of day 3. Her body ached so badly, she had to bite her lip to keep from wincing during drills. Her elbows were raw from crawling, her palms torn open from the obstacle course. During the rope climb, she slipped halfway and fell hard. No one offered help. The instructors watched. One of them, Staff Sergeant Dunn, leaned in and said, "Ramirez, if you want to play soldier, go home and play Call of Duty. This is for real warriors." Still, she got up during chow that night. She sat alone at the end of the bench, sipping lukewarm soup and replaying the day's humiliations in her mind. The guys at the next table laughed, louder than necessary. Mahoney leaned in and said with a smirk, "Featherweight's got heart. I'll give her that. Just no muscle." Alyssa's hand clenched the spoon tightly, but she didn't respond. Not then. That night, as the others slept in neat rows of bunks, she lay awake, staring at the metal ceiling above her. Her body pulsed with pain. Her lungs still burned. Her mind wanted to scream. But instead, she reached under her pillow and pulled out a small creased photo. Her father. He was young in it, barely out of high school, wearing the same uniform she now struggled to earn. He had died 3 years earlier, too soon. Cancer took him, but he'd once been a warfighter. He told her stories as a child, never about glory, always about grit. He'd said something that stuck with her. The Corps doesn't care about where you're from. It only cares about whether you'll break or break through. She sat up in bed, her arms screened. Her legs trembled. But she didn't lie back down. Quietly, she slipped off the sheets and dropped to the floor between the bunks. Push-ups. Slow. Silent. 1, 2, 3. She reached 20, then 30. Then she started shadowboxing. She moved clumsily, but with purpose. Pivot. Jab. Step back. Breathe. Her mind wasn't on the pain. It was on the laughter. The smirks. The weight of expectations on her back. She wasn't just fighting to pass a test. She was fighting to prove she had a place in the most elite. Fighting force on Earth. She didn't care if they liked her. But she would make sure they remembered her. At 4:30 a.m., the lights flashed on and the drill instructors stormed in, screaming for boots on the ground. The recruits groaned. Alyssa was already standing, drenched in sweat, face calm. Nobody noticed yet, but that day, during drills, she finished her push-ups faster. When ordered to run 3 miles, she didn't lag at the back. She ran in the middle. When asked to lift a wounded dummy in the fireman carry, she didn't fall this time. She staggered, but didn't collapse. And still, no one applauded. That was fine with her. Applause meant nothing. But later that night, when she returned to her bunk and peeled off her socks, she noticed something. Her blistered feet weren't trembling anymore. They were steady. It happened on a Tuesday, the day Alyssa Ramirez almost quit. The rain came down in waves, soaking the training field in thick southern mud. Every step was a suction cup. Every breath felt like dragging air through a wet sponge. The drill instructors barked with the same merciless rhythm they always did, their voices cutting through the wind like razors. They were halfway through the combat endurance test. Crawling, sprinting, lifting, carrying non-stop physical punishment for nearly 2 hours. Recruits dropped one by one, hands on knees, chests heaving. Some vomited, some cried, but most pushed on. Alyssa pushed too, but her legs betrayed her. She slipped in the mud during a bear crawl, face smashing into the earth. The cold shot into her mouth and nostrils like a punch. She tried to rise, but her elbows gave out. She fell again. The drill instructors didn't wait. "Get up, Ramirez." I said get up. She tried, failed. A sharp whistle blew. One of them stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Dunn." "Pull her out," he ordered another instructor. "She's done." The words echoed in her head. She's done. She couldn't see clearly. Mud stung her eyes. Blood dripped from her lip, but she heard the murmurs from nearby recruits. A few scoffed. One voice, Mahoney's, cut through the rest like a blade. "Told you. She's not made for this." 2 arms hauled her to her feet and carried her off the course. Elisa's body dangled limp between them. She wasn't unconscious, just hollow. That night, in the barracks, she didn't speak. The pain had moved past her muscles and into her bones. Her knuckles throbbed. Her knees were swollen. Her ribs ached every time she turned. And worse than the pain was the silence. No one came to check on her. She sat alone, back against the bunk frame, staring blankly. One of the other female recruits, corporal in training Jayla Green, gave her a quiet glance across the room. But even Jayla said nothing. It wasn't out of cruelty. Everyone had their own battles. In boot camp, weakness could be contagious. No one wanted to be near the one who was about to wash out. Alyssa bit her lip to stop the tears. She'd already heard the whispers about medical discharges, about the quiet bus back home, about those who quit before the uniform was earned. She pulled open her footlocker and reached inside. Her fingers fumbled until they found what? They needed a crumpled photo wrapped in a plastic sandwich bag. Her father, again, standing tall, years younger, with his hand resting on her head. She was 6 in the photo, missing 2 teeth and beaming. He was smiling too, wearing that crisp uniform like it was part of his soul. He'd always said the course would break her. "Not to destroy you," he used to say, "but to see if you're willing to rebuild yourself stronger." She hadn't believed it then. She did now. She stared at the photo for a long time, the edges worn soft from too many nights like this. Then she moved, slowly, deliberately. Alyssa rose to her feet. Her legs were trembling. Her chest hurt, but she stood anyway. The barracks lights were dim now, most of the squad asleep or pretending to be. She didn't care. She dropped to the floor. Push up, another. Each one set her nerves on fire. But she didn't stop. Not until her arms gave out and her nose touched the floor. Then she turned over. Crunches. She imagined Mahoney's smug face every time she came up. 20. 40. 60. Her shirt clung to her like wet gauze. Her breath was ragged. Sweat pooled at the back of her neck, but her hands were steady. Her mind clear. She moved again. Squats. SHAOWBOXING. More push-ups. She wasn't training to pass. She was training to survive. After nearly an hour, she collapsed onto her bunk. Heart racing, muscles twitching. She couldn't sleep, but she smiled. For the first time since arriving, Elisa had found something real, something burning deep within. Her gut. It wasn't rage. Not quite. It was a promise. The next morning, when Reveille screamed through the speakers and Boots hit the floor and practiced rhythm, Elisa was already dressed. Her movements were slower than usual, but sharper, more intentional. She stood in formation like everyone else, but her eyes didn't flicker or flinch. The fire hadn't faded overnight. It had settled into her bones. The squad noticed something different. Jayla gave her a brief nod. A few of the ones who had ignored her before glanced her way and looked twice. Mahoney just grunted, shaking his head. The instructors didn't mention her fall. They didn't need to. Instead, during drills that afternoon, they tested her. Ramirez, carry Private Davis across the field. Go. Davis was 200 pounds. Elisa nearly buckled, but she got him up, step by agonizing step. Ramirez, lead the crawl. Don't stop. She didn't. She still came in behind the strongest. But now she wasn't dead last. And when they hit the obstacle wall again, the same one that had shredded her palms 2 weeks ago, she climbed, slipped, climbed again, and made it. By dinner, her body screamed with every breath, but no one called her featherweight. They just called her Ramirez, and that was enough, for now. Elisa Ramirez learned to stop speaking, not because she had nothing to say, but because words were distractions. In a place like Paris Island, silence was strength. Recruits who talked too much drew fire from the drill instructors. The loud ones burned out early. The cocky ones folded under pressure. The quiet ones? The ones who listened, studied, adapted, and lasted. So she stopped reacting to comments, stopped meeting insults with even a glance. Every joke at her expense rolled off her like sweat off her soaked uniform. Her eyes did the talking now, focused, calculating, cold when they needed to be. Every free moment, she trained. When others huddled under shade during 5-minute breathers, she stretched her calves or practiced grip strength by squeezing her water canteen. While the squad chattered about sports or food, or what they'd do once they graduated, Elisa was memorizing the proper grip for an M16, or adjusting her stance during marching drills. Until her form was textbook perfect, the transformation was gradual but undeniable. It started with a simple change: her run times. By the 3rd week, she wasn't just finishing the endurance course, she was finishing mid-pack. Then came the rope climb. She stopped hesitating, stopped second-guessing. She scrambled up it with her teeth clenched, legs pumping, arms burning, and rang the bell at the top with a cry that turned heads. Next came the shooting range. To everyone's surprise, including her own, she was a natural. She listened more than most, applied feedback instantly, and never rushed a shot. On the first qualifying round, she scored higher than half the platoon. One drill instructor murmured, almost impressed, "Featherweight's got an eye." She heard it, didn't smile. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to endure. Still, the name lingered. Featherweight. They didn't use it to her face anymore, but she heard it sometimes in passing, from those who still clung to their egos like body armor. Mahoney was the worst. He couldn't stand that she was catching up, then surpassing him. You win one shooting badge, and suddenly you're Rambo? He barked one night during night drills. Alyssa didn't reply, but her silence hit harder than any comeback. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes, because the others were noticing. 2. Staff Sergeant Coleman had noticed her weeks earlier. At first, he had grouped her in with the risky recruits, those who were most likely to wash out. But he'd been watching, noticing the way she moved, always slightly outside the group, but never behind it. She didn't compete loudly. She competed inwardly. And now she was rising. One night, after most of the squad had gone to bed, Coleman caught her near the edge of the training yard, using her own body weight to practice low kicks and balance. "Ramirez," he barked. She froze, turned. "You training for something, or just dancing with ghosts?" "Just working, Staff Sergeant." He walked over, looked her up and down. Then, to her surprise, he dropped into a stance. "Your pivot's too wide. You're exposing your flank. Try again." She adjusted. He nodded. "Better." He didn't say anything else. Just walked off. But that was the moment everything changed. From then on, Coleman would occasionally pause near her during drills, correcting her grip, her form, her movement, not with the disdain he showed the others, but with the tone of a craftsman shaping a blade, and the blade was getting sharper. In the barracks, Jayla Green finally broke the ice one night. "You got steel in your spine, Ramirez," she said softly as lights flickered off. Alyssa rolled onto her side. "I'm just tired of being underestimated." "Then keep making them regret it." From that night on, they trained together, quietly, efficiently. They'd wake 20 minutes early to run short sprints behind the barracks. They practiced firemen, carries with loaded packs, takedowns on gym mats, low kicks in the dark. Alyssa studied videos when she could: military tactics, jiu-jitsu moves, marine martial arts. Her brain became another muscle, always working. Mahoney watched from afar. He noticed how the instructors treated her differently now. Not softly. No one was treated softly, but with a strange kind of curiosity. Like they wanted to see how far she could go. It irritated him. He'd been the alpha here since day one. But now, people listened when she spoke. People watched when she moved. And still, she didn't smile. Didn't boast. She was hunting something deeper than approval. The first true test came during a night assault drill. Teams had to breach a mock structure, clear it, and secure a simulated wounded Marine under heavy simulated gunfire. Each squad had a leader. Mahoney led Alpha Squad. Alyssa was assigned Bravo. Her squad wasn't thrilled. "She's book smart, not battle smart," someone whispered. She heard. She ignored it. The whistle blew. The lights dropped. Red strobes flickered. Sirens screamed. Mahoney's team rushed in, aggressive and loud. Alyssa crouched, studied the entry point, and gave orders calmly. "Flanking. Stack left. Keep pressure low." She was slower, but more precise. Her team cleared the structure in half. The time Mahoney's did, and without losing a single mock casualty. Afterward, Staff Sergeant Coleman debriefed both squads. He didn't smile often, but when he turned to Alyssa, he nodded. "Good leadership under pressure, Ramirez." Mahoney didn't say anything that night, but when he passed her in the hallway, he didn't sneer. He didn't smirk. He just looked at her carefully, like a rival who finally recognized a threat. The sky over Paris Island hung low and gray, like a lid over a boiling pot. A storm threatened in the distance, but it wasn't the weather that electrified the air that day. It was the buzz spreading across the field. The combat gauntlet had returned. It was a legendary stress test, one whispered about more than officially scheduled. Most recruits would only see it as spectators. It wasn't required. It was earned. The instructors chose who ran the gauntlet. You didn't volunteer. You were chosen. And today, Elisa Ramirez was chosen. When Staff Sergeant Coleman read the names out loud, no one flinched until they heard hers. Ramirez. Step forward. She did. Your challenge. 5 consecutive one-on-one combat simulations. Opponents rotate in. You don't leave the circle. You don't get water. You fight until it's over or until you quit. Whispers rolled across the formation. Is this a joke? She's gonna get wrecked. Even Jayla looked at her like, you sure about this? Alyssa's face was unreadable. She nodded once. Staff Sergeant Coleman turned to the group. First opponent, Private Lawson. Lawson stepped forward. Broad-shouldered, a former college linebacker. His eyes flicked over Alyssa like she was paperwork. He rolled his neck and entered the circle. The instructors barked. Begin. Lawson lunged. Alyssa ducked low. She was already calculating. She wasn't going to win with power, but she didn't need to. She just had to survive with control. As Lawson came forward again, arms swinging wide, she grabbed his wrist, pivoted hard, and used his momentum against him. Her hips dropped, her legs swept, and he hit the dirt. Hard. The squad gasped. Alyssa stepped back, breathing steady. Lawson groaned, stunned. He slapped the mat to signal yield. 1 down, Coleman called. Next. Private Reeves was next. Taller, faster. His approach was smarter jab, feint, retreat. Alyssa circled him, patient. He aimed high. She went low, catching his knee. He stumbled, and she lunged into a sweep. Another takedown. 2 down. The energy in the crowd shifted. They weren't laughing anymore. Third up, Private Ortega, a wiry, scrappy fighter known for dirty elbows. He opened with aggression, trying to overwhelm. Elisa took a hit to the shoulder, absorbed the pain, and spun under his next punch. Her elbow met his gut. She followed with a takedown and pinned his arm in a joint lock. Tap. 3 down. Now she was panting, sweat pouring into her eyes. Her body screamed. Her heart raced. But her mind? Clear. Focus. Double quotes forth, Colin said. His voice had lost its edge. It almost sounded impressed. Private Duval stepped forward. He wasn't the strongest, but he was the biggest. Over 6 feet. Tall, thick as a tank, and fresh. Elisa's arms ached just looking at him. He entered the ring slowly. Raised his fists. Don't take this personal, he muttered. Alyssa just nodded. Duval charged. She ducked left, but too slow. His arm clipped her jaw. Her vision blurred. She tasted blood. She dropped to a knee. Somewhere in the crowd, Mahoney grinned. That's it. Told you. But Alyssa didn't stay down. She rose. Duval came again. She sidestepped, dug her fingers into his shirt, and redirected his weight just enough to make him stumble. She jumped behind him, wrapped her arms around his torso, and leapt, dragging him to the mat. They rolled. She landed on top, arms around his neck. Duval struggled, gasped. And then slapped the mat. Tap. 4 down. The crowd didn't cheer, but the silence was louder than applause. Alyssa stood, eyes glazed with pain, but still focused. Her ribs throbbed. Her arms shook. She couldn't feel her fingers, but she didn't move. Coleman stared at her for a long second. Then he raised his voice. Final opponent, Private Mahoney. The tension cracked like lightning. Mahoney stepped forward, slow, grinning. His smirk was too big, too forced. I've been waiting for this, he said, stretching his neck. You're tougher than you look, featherweight. But this is where you break. She didn't respond. He entered the ring. The moment froze. Then, begin! Mahoney didn't charge. He circled. He was a wrestler. He knew Alyssa was tired. He'd seen the damage. He waited. She waited too. Their eyes locked. Then he lunged. She ducked. He grabbed her arm, yanked hard, spun to slam her classic takedown move. But Alyssa rolled through it, using his torque to twist free, landing behind him. Her arm shot up around his neck. He elbowed back hard. It caught her ribs. She staggered, breath catching. He turned, threw a hook. She ducked under, countered with a brutal palm strike to the solar plexus. Mahoney gasped. She swept his leg. They both fell. Scrambling. Dust. Silence. Then Mahoney face down, Alyssa pinning his arm behind him in a textbook lock. Tap. Tap. The instructors stepped in. Stop. Alyssa released him. The circle erupted, not in applause, not in shouting, but in stunned silence. Even Mahoney lay there, breathing heavy, eyes wide. Alyssa stood. Her face bruised, lips split, arms trembling, but standing. Coleman stepped forward. No one's ever finished the 5. He didn't need to say anything else. She had done what none of them thought possible. The girl they called Featherweight had taken down 5 Marines one by one, clean, decisive. The moment would echo long after the bruises faded. Alyssa didn't smile. She just nodded, walked out of the circle. As she passed Mahoney, he looked up and muttered, just loud enough for her to hear, respect. It wasn't just a fight. It was the moment the island changed. The moment Alyssa Ramirez stopped being the girl trying to keep up and became something else entirely. But first, she had to survive Mahoney. After 4 grueling rounds in the gauntlet, Alyssa stood in the training ring, breath sharp and uneven, lungs aching for more air than her body could draw in. Her muscles throbbed, her head pounded. Her right eye was already swelling, but her stance hadn't broken. Her fists remained up. Mahoney circled her with a look she'd seen too many times, entitlement wrapped in confidence. He rolled his shoulders like he was walking into a friendly sparring match. Gotta say, he muttered, loud enough for the others to hear, didn't think you'd make it this far. Alyssa didn't respond. He tilted his head mockingly. What? Too tired to talk, she blinked. Sweat trickled from her temple down to her chin. The noise of the other recruits faded into a low, tense hum. All she could hear was the drumbeat in her chest and the voice of her father echoing inside her head. Pain is a test, and the test is pass-fail. Staff Sergeant Coleman called out, "Ready, begin." Mahoney charged. There was no hesitation, no respect. He came in hard, expecting to end it quick, just like he always did. He swung low, aiming for her midsection, planning to lift and slam. But Alyssa spun. She deflected his grasp, planted her heel, and struck him clean in the ribs with a left elbow. It wasn't elegant, but it was solid. He grunted, surprised. Then retaliated fast. A right hook connected with her shoulder, sending a shockwave down her arm. She stumbled, caught herself, barely kept upright. The squad collectively flinched. Mahoney saw the wobble. He smirked. "You're out of gas, Ramirez." He feinted left, then jabbed right, catching her temple. Alyssa dropped to one knee. The world spun, but she didn't fall. She pressed her hand into the dirt, grounding herself. Mahoney stepped closer, overconfident, trying to go for a rear grip. That's when Alyssa struck. Like a viper from stillness, she lunged forward, grabbed his wrist, and twisted, yanking him downward. He lost his footing and crashed sideways, landing hard. The squad roared, but no one moved. Mahoney groaned, rolled over, and came at her again, this time slower. Angrier, he rushed in, tried to trap her in a bear hug, using his weight to pin her. Elisa felt the breath crush from her lungs as he squeezed. Her ribs screamed. For a moment, everything went red. Then she remembered the counter dot, pivot dot, drop weight, that shift center of gravity dot. She did it in one motion, driving her hips backward, then hooking her leg around his, and throwing all her leverage to the side. Mahoney's balance disappeared. They crashed. She landed atop him, straddling, pinning his shoulders with her knees. Before he could recover, she hooked his arm, locked it behind his head, and pulled. He resisted. She leaned harder. His face twisted dot, then dash, tap. Tap dot, silence dot, Elisa let go and rolled off, panting. She stayed on her back for a second, staring. At the sky, the clouds had moved on. Just blue now, vast, open, endless. The instructors blew the whistle. Coleman's voice rang out. Fight's over. Recruits stood frozen, eyes wide. No one knew what to say. Mahoney sat up slowly, rubbing his shoulder. He looked at Elisa, not with resentment, not even disbelief. Just respect dot. He stood first dot, then offered her a hand. She hesitated, then took it. He pulled her to her feet, quietly muttering, Didn't think you had that in you. Guess I was wrong. She didn't smile. Didn't gloat dot, just nodded dot, and for the first time since arrival, Mahoney didn't follow it with a joke. Recruits parted as Elisa walked back to the line. A few even clapped her on the shoulder. Jayla grinned like she'd just watched her sister win a title fight. Staff Sergeant Coleman stood still, arms crossed, eyes studying her dot. Then he spoke, calmly. No recruit has ever taken down 5 opponents. In the gauntlet, not one. A pause. You just made Paris Island history, Ramirez. Elisa blinked, not fully registering it, because all she could feel was the burning in her lungs, the blood pulsing in her neck, and the rising realization that she'd just crossed a threshold one she could never step back from. That night, the barracks were different. There were no snickers, no whispers, no jokes behind her back dot. In fact, there was silence when she entered. A few recruits actually stood aside to let her through. Jayla raised her fist for a silent bump. Even Mahoney nodded across the room. You earned that one, he said. Elisa finally spoke. Thanks. He smiled wryly. Don't expect me to go easy next time. She gave him a look that said, I wouldn't want you to. Then she went to her bunk, laid down, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was pretending to be a Marine. She felt like she belonged, not because someone said it, not because she passed a test, but because she broke through every limit they put in her way, every doubt, every insult, every stereotype, and walked out stronger. She had fought 5 Marines, and she didn't just survive, she won. The change wasn't loud. It came quietly like all real changes do. The next morning, Elisa Ramirez stepped into formation, just like every other day. Uniform crisp, boots shined, chin up. But the atmosphere had shifted like a silent tide. No one said it out loud. No one had to. The whispers had stopped. The glances were different now. Not amused. Not dismissive. Focused. The recruits stood just a little straighter when she walked past. Even those who once scoffed at her moved with a new kind of wariness. Mahoney, who hadn't acknowledged anyone without a smirk since day one, now gave her a silent nod when they locked eyes. He hadn't spoken to her since the fight. But he hadn't cracked another joke either. She preferred it that way. Even Staff Sergeant Coleman, usually stern and unreadable, lingered a beat longer when he passed her during drills. He didn't offer praise, he wasn't that kind of man, but he no longer barked orders with the same biting tone. His corrections were technical now, respectful, tactical, and Elisa responded in kind. She was no longer just trying to keep up. She was setting the pace. Later that week, her squad was tasked with leading the final 10K endurance march. Instructors had planted injured dummies. Each team was responsible for transporting their casualty using a fireman's carry across rough terrain. Mahoney was assigned to Alyssa's unit. No one questioned it. Halfway through the course, their dummies' straps broke, throwing off the balance of their carry. The team started to panic. The mud thickened with every step. One recruit dropped back, wheezing. They lost nearly 3 minutes fumbling with the body harness. Alyssa took command without shouting. "You two, adjust the straps. Mahoney, take left shoulder. I'll rotate in second half. Let's go. No delay." No doubt. Mahoney moved immediately. They made up the lost time dot by the end of the course. They came in first dot when Staff Sergeant Dunn reviewed the scores. He looked over at Alyssa with narrowed eyes. "You lead that carry?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant." He grunted. "Huh, didn't expect that from you." "Months ago." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Later that night, in the dim light of the barracks, Jayla sat next to her during cleanup. "You know you've changed everything, right?" Alyssa glanced up. "You remember how it started," Jayla continued. "You were the weak link. Now people ask what you're doing after lights out. You're like a quiet storm." Alyssa chuckled. "I'm just surviving." Jayla shook her head. "No, you're leading." "That's different." It hit her then how far she'd come. Not just physically, but mentally. She had gone from being invisible to unavoidable. But she didn't feel like a different person. She just felt unlocked, like the version of herself that had always been inside had finally been allowed to breathe. The next morning, during weapons maintenance, Staff Sergeant Coleman approached with something in his hand. "Ramirez." "Yes, Staff Sergeant." He held up a laminated sheet photos and notes of recruits used for peer motivation. Usually, only top performers made the board. Or examples of failure. One or the other. You made the board. Alyssa looked at it. There she was, in mid-fight stance, arm around Mahoney's neck from the gauntlet takedown. Below it, a caption. "Discipline over strength. Precision over size." She blinked. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant." He nodded once. "Don't let it go to your head. You're not done here." "I don't plan to be." He smirked almost. "Good." The moment passed, but the image stuck with her, not because she liked seeing herself on display, but because it meant something. A reminder that her struggle had mattered, that her fight, her pain, her push had created a ripple. Over the next few weeks, more recruits began approaching her after drills. "How do you keep your balance during takedowns? What do you do for grip strength? Mind showing me that shoulder lock again?" She never turned anyone away. Even Mahoney came by during one combat training rotation and asked, "You got a minute?" She raised an eyebrow. He shifted awkwardly. "I keep losing my base during sweeps. Think you could help?" Sure. And just like that, the alpha dog came to learn from the one he once called featherweight. There was no fanfare, no ceremony. But in that quiet moment, power shifted earned, not taken out at mail call one day. Alyssa received a small envelope. No return address. Inside was a short note, written in her mother's careful handwriting. "Your father would be proud." But more importantly, you should be proud of you. Keep fighting. Keep building. Love always, Mom. Alyssa folded it carefully, tucked it into her breast pocket, and held it there as they marched to chow. She didn't share it, but her chest felt a little stronger. The final weeks of boot camp were near. Graduation loomed like a finish line no one wanted to jinx, but Alyssa wasn't racing toward it. She was walking through it, measured, prepared, hardened. Others were now watching her during drills, listening when she gave suggestions, repeating her form, repeating her words. Even Coleman had caught it. "Ramirez," he said during hand-to-hand review. Seems like half the platoon's following your form now. She shrugged. He grunted. Keep leading. But don't forget quiet leaders carry the heaviest weight. She nodded. I can handle it. For the first time, he smiled. And it wasn't small. The girl they once called weak was now the unspoken standard dot. She didn't ask for power. She didn't steal it. She became it dot by surviving dot by rising dot by refusing to break. The air was thick with salt and pride. Dot it was graduation morning at Paris Island, and the parade deck shimmered under the Carolina sun. Rows of recruits, now Marines, stood locked in formation, motionless but vibrating with energy. Months of blood, sweat, tears, and tests had led here. To this field. To this single, breathless moment. Alyssa Ramirez stood in the front row of her platoon, chest high, boots planted like anchors. Her uniform was spotless. Her ribbons gleamed. Her face bruises faded, but not forgotten. Was calm. But inside, storm raged, not fear. Not nerves. A mix of everything else. She scanned the crowd of families behind the barricades. Faces blurred together until her eyes locked on one, her mother. Maria Ramirez stood front and center, a small woman holding a folded program in both hands. Her hair was pinned back tightly, and though her eyes were hidden behind sunglasses, Alyssa knew she was crying and smiling, and probably praying all at once. Behind her mother, Alyssa could see something else, a worn photo of her father, enlarged and mounted on a cardboard sign. He wore the same dress blues she now had on. A caption below read, "You made us proud." She's doing the same. A lump rose in Alyssa's throat. She didn't fight it. She held her breath and blinked hard. Because she'd earned this. The ceremony began. The Marine Corps band played sharp and clean. The reviewing officer barked praise, and the names of top performing recruits echoed through the sound system. When they called hers, there was no roar of surprise, just thunderous applause. Everyone expected it by now. Private First Class Alyssa Ramirez, recipient of the Iron Reaper Commendation for outstanding combat performance and leadership under pressure. Even the announcer's voice held a note of awe. The crowd exploded. Alyssa marched forward, accepting the plaque from the commandant with a perfect salute. Her movements were crisp, drilled into muscle memory, but her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the award. The Iron Reaper wasn't given every cycle. Sometimes it wasn't given at all. It was reserved for recruits who didn't just survive training, they transformed it. Who led with action. Who inspired without asking for attention, and now her name was on that list, after the ceremony. The energy on the base was electric. Families swarmed their newly minted Marines. Laughter, shouting, happy tears. Alyssa walked calmly through the sea of celebration until she felt a hand grab her wrist. Her mother pulled her into the tightest embrace she'd had since she was 12. "I can't believe it," Maria whispered, sobbing. "I knew you could do it, but seeing you like this, Alyssa didn't speak. Her hands simply clutched the back of her mother's blouse as she cried quietly into her shoulder. "I wish your father was here," Maria said. "He would have stood on top of a table just to shout your name." Alyssa smiled, tears sliding down her cheek. "I heard him anyway." They stayed like that for a long time. The world around them spun. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. Later, the platoon gathered in the mess hall for one final meal together. Recruits know, Marines now joked and shoved each other, passing trays, swapping numbers, exchanging social media handles. Mahoney sat across from Alyssa, a grin on his face. "You know," he said between bites, "you really messed up my plan. To be top dog." Alyssa raised an eyebrow. "Guess you'll have to settle for second," she teased. Yeah, he smirked. "I'm just glad I got taken down by a legend." Alyssa shook her head. "I'm not a legend. Too late, he said. You've got a nickname now. She groaned. Oh God, what is it? Mahoney leaned in. Ghost, she frowned. You move quiet. You strike hard. You disappear, like a ghost. Across the table, Jayla chimed in. Better than featherweight, huh? Elisa couldn't help but laugh. Before lights out, the instructors held one final address in the barracks. They called each Marine forward for one last handshake. This time, as equals. When Elisa reached Coleman, he didn't say anything at first. Just looked her over, like he was memorizing every inch of her. Transformation. Then, he offered his hand. I've trained a lot of recruits, he said. Most forgettable, a few good. But every few years, someone comes through who changes how the others train. You did that. She shook his hand. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. He lowered his voice. I heard you're heading into combat instructor school. She nodded. That's the goal. He smiled faintly. You'll be hell on recruits, she smirked. They won't know what hit them. That night, in her bunk for the last time, Elisa lay awake, staring at the ceiling just like she had during her lowest nights. But this time, the pain wasn't from bruises or exhaustion. It was pride. Not the flashy kind. Not the boastful kind. The kind that runs deep. Quiet. Unshakable. She reached into her duffel and pulled out the photo of her father one last time. She didn't cry. She just held it. You are right, she whispered. The Corps breaks you, then shows you what's underneath. She slid the photo back into her pocket. Outside, a breeze rolled over the island. It was warm. Gentle. Peaceful. Tomorrow. She'd leave as a Marine. But tonight, she rested not as someone who survived the system, but as someone who'd helped redefine it. 3 years later, the name Elisa Ramirez still echoed across Paris Island, but she was no longer just a story whispered in bunks, or a photo pinned to a wall. She had become the standard. Now, she stood at the edge of a training field, not as a recruit, not even as a newly minted Marine, but as Combat Instructor Ramirez. Her uniform bore no extra flair, no demand for attention. But everyone noticed her the second she stepped onto the sand. She walked with purpose, shoulders squared, voice calm but commanding. Recruits straightened before she even spoke. They knew her reputation before they ever met her. The woman who once dropped to her knees during basic drills, now taught those same drills and redefined them. That morning, she stood in front of Echo Company, eyes scanning 64 fresh faces. Among them, a new generation of doubters, dreamers, and soon-to-be warriors. One girl, smaller than the rest, stood in the back of the pack, fidgeting with her chin strap. Elisa spotted it instantly. That familiar uncertainty. The weight of being underestimated before you even begin. She walked toward the girl, stopped a few feet away, and asked plainly, What's your name, recruit? The girl stood rigid. Washington, Mom. You ever been told you're not strong enough for this? The girl hesitated. Yes, ma'am. Elisa's eyes held hers. Good. Prove them wrong. She turned, barked to the group. Let's begin. The recruits surged into motion. Elisa didn't look back, but she didn't need to. She knew Washington's steps would land a little firmer after that. Later that week, while observing combat drills, another instructor approached Elisa, a sharp-tongued staff sergeant named Maddox, who had little patience for fluff. You're a legend around here, he muttered. They say you took down 5 guys in your gauntlet and walked away like it was just Tuesday. Elisa chuckled. More like limped away. He grinned. Still, that kind of story sticks. She shrugged. Stories fade. What matters is what comes after. He tilted his head. You don't care about the credit, do you? She shook her head. I care that the next girl who gets called weak doesn't flinch. Back in the instructor's quarters, Alyssa kept her bunk neat, her schedule tighter than regulations required. On her desk was a single-framed photo. Her and her mother at graduation, and her father's photo taped between them. Next to it sat a small note. The same one her mother had mailed her 3 years ago. You should be proud of you. She read it often, not because she forgot, but to remind herself that legacy wasn't about medals or plaques. It was about moments. One recruit refusing to quit because she saw someone like Alyssa make it. One voice telling the doubted they had a shot. One shift in mindset that ripples through an entire generation. Months into her instructor rotation, something strange happened. Recruits began requesting to train under her. They'd seen her name in the course forums, read her story in an old magazine feature, or heard it secondhand from Marines in the fleet. Alyssa never endorsed it, but she didn't shy from it either. She trained them hard, no shortcuts, no soft landings, and when they broke, she didn't scream. She just knelt beside them and said, "You're not done yet." Some cried. Some got angry. But almost all of them got back up. They didn't want pity. They wanted what she had, proof that strength comes from choosing to rise again and again. At one graduation, a female recruit named Patel stood at attention, clutching her own commendation. She'd aced the obstacle course, broken unit records, led fire teams with precision. After the ceremony, she approached Alyssa. "Ma'am," she said, voice tight with emotion, "I just want to say thank you. I almost dropped during week 2. But then someone told me your story about how you weren't supposed to make it either. And I thought, if she didn't quit, I won't." Alyssa studied her for a second, then nodded. "You earned this. No one else." "Yes, Mom." As the young Marine turned to leave, Alyssa added quietly, "Pass it on." One night, under a dim porch light outside the barracks, Alyssa sat with a cup of coffee, watching the stars over the island. Coleman, now retired, had sent her a letter. "Ramirez, never said this back then, but you are one of the finest Marines I ever trained, not just because you fought hard, because you changed people. Quiet leadership like yours, that lasts. Semper Fi." She folded the letter and set it beside her coffee. Somewhere, new recruits were arriving, nervous, unsure, afraid they wouldn't measure up. And one day soon, one of them would walk into a ring, hear the word weak, and smile, not because it didn't hurt, but because they'd know weakness is only the beginning of strength. They'd heard the story. They believed it. And now they were ready to write their own. Alyssa Ramirez never asked to become a symbol. She just refused to break. And in doing so, she lit a flame that still burns across every training field, every quiet footfall, every moment. Someone dares to fight back against doubt. That's legacy. Not noise. Just fire. Quiet. Unstoppable. The end.